All right, so the next thing in Guild Wars 2, which was, in my opinion, one of the I had mixed feelings on it. The system was crafting.
Crafting, yes.
Crafting is both time-consuming, but it is also very rewarding. But it's also very annoying because of the amount of stuff you have to get for it.
Oh yeah.
What were you guys' feelings, Liz? Let's start with you.
It's a great source of XP if you don't mind spending a lot of money on materials, or if you don't want to spend a lot of time not getting a whole lot of XP while gathering. The actual crafting portion is very, very rewarding.
Right, but gathering, other than, because you had your main material that you could easily get from, if you needed wood, you go chop down trees. For me, I was a ore guy, so I just found a little thing into ore and got whatever materials I needed. But it was the enemy materials that you needed, the rare drops, and you always needed a ton of them.
Yeah, it took 3+ per craft, and you had to spend at least 30 minutes getting maybe your 3 if you were lucky.
Yeah, and it's because for me, on my engineer, I'm doing Huntsman, which is a lot of the ranged weapons, and leather smithing, which is the medium gear. A lot of my items I need to craft, I have to get off of creatures, because I have to get their skins to get the leather. Yeah,
because I'm also a leatherworking. Getting the actual leather was the hardest part, because I would never find any.
Yeah, and as a tailor, I had the same problem with the cloth. You have to kill humanoids to get the cloth.
But see, I didn't have a problem. I have tons of cloth. I had tons of it. Leather, on the other hand, didn't get as much.
And it also probably depends on where you're really questing, because, for me and Lizzie, we were questing in the Char area, which is a lot of creatures and ghosts. Ghosts really don't drop cloth. They drop maybe a weapon or two that you can disassemble, or a piece of armor that you can salvage to hopefully get cloth off of. Otherwise, you really don't run into a lot of humanoid enemies in the Char area.
Okay, because I know at least in... because I'm in the human area right now, the human and Norn area that's all it is. Humans.
Yeah.
A lot of thieves. Savari was a lot more animal, so I didn't get as much from that.
A lot of spiders in the Savari area.
Yes, a lot of spiders. I have plenty of, venomous sacs. But in order to, you need all that stuff, but I think the real rewarding part from at least crafting, that was the annoying part, not for, the positive rewarding part, was when you crafted, you built just kind of the base materials for what you actually would make, and then you would take those base materials and combine them with all the other things you made to make, one piece of gear.
Yeah, which was the discoveries. It's basically, they give you a base items of what you can make, and then you just took, I can make a regular rifle, here's this totem that I made for this rifle, for a thing. Let's put that with the rifle, and boom, you got a new rifle with the skill that you just made the totem for.
Okay, yeah, because I know for leatherworking, you had to, once again, going back to the terrible part, you had to gather, at least for the stuff that I'm making, is I have to have 15 of whatever rare material, which takes me 3 hours to get to make one piece.
Yeah.
But, I make that and put it on, have my 2 shoulder pieces, which are very easy to make, combine all those pieces, and then I get something, amazing.
Yeah.
And I get a ton of experience for it.
Yeah, and it's when you do your discoveries, you get a lot of EXP for it, because the fact that you're making a discovery for the new piece of armor that you're making, or weapon, or whatever.
Right.
It also tends to give you at least a full level, if not more, off of discovering the item, whereas if you craft just an item, it gives you maybe a third to a half of a skill level.
Right, so it rewards you more for discovering your patterns than just making stuff, just making the basic.
Right.
And the one thing I found about crafting that I kind of like about the system is the fact that when you're trying to craft multiple items of one thing, it'll start off slow, but then basically zip through the rest of it pretty fast. So instead of sitting there crafting the thing for 10 minutes, you can be done making a bunch of like leather pieces out of ruined leather in like 2 minutes. Because if you had like you've been questing and you've gathered up, you have like 30 to make 30 square raw leather pieces. It took like a minute maybe.
Right. And the good news is by the time it's done with those 30 pieces, you've already gained half a level because crafting, leveling is ridiculously overpowered in this game. Yeah, so, but luckily crafting the gear isn't as important, at least not yet. Gear I find is kind of minimal. You don't really have huge gaps in gear like you do in like World of Warcraft and SWTOR, whereas, from the 10 to 15 gear, there's a huge jump in stats, whereas Guild Wars 2, I didn't really notice a huge jump in stats from like 10, and then I noticed the biggest was when I hit 20.
Yeah, they like to just kind of, every time you completed a story quest or you found new gear, it seemed like each one went up by 1 or 2 points as you were progressing, so they kind of eased you into it instead of just dropping better gear on you.
Yeah, and it wasn't really a lot of, you're focused on it. It was your focus was more or less for your skills and traits when you got them. That's where most of your boost was from.
Right, because like we said earlier, the traits are, that's where most of your stats come from, because it gives you ridiculous amounts of, I think, 10 per point you put in.
Yep.
Yes.
For stat, yeah, so.
To 2 of your stats.
Yeah, well, at least for Thief it was usually 1, and then, like, some boost to, timing, like how long my poisons lasted, or how long my other stuff lasted.
Yeah, it was a lot of, it took 2 different points for each section and was like, okay, well, it boosts this and this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the last thing we're going to talk about, since I think we covered crafting to death, is dungeons.
Woo.
Like in all other MMOs, especially, World of Warcraft, there are dungeons in this game. Unlike World of Warcraft, where you can just LOL your way through most of them, Guild Wars 2 decided to make it painful and as hard as possible.
They wanted you to hate your life.
Yes. This is both where I started hating this game, and then I found that it was okay. But that's because the first dungeon is super demoralizing.
Yes, it is.
I don't have footage of the first dungeon. The footage that's been playing is the second dungeon, which, as you can see, I'm actually doing okay in. Is the first dungeon I almost cried because I died every 30 seconds, if not quicker.
I think I spent more time reviving my teammates than trying to kill things.
I was dead. I was the one dying. The people you were reviving, that was me and my group, because
I was busy throwing heals and not dying.
Yeah, because the first dungeon is not melee friendly, and I was a melee class. Mobs in dungeons tended to one-shot me, and I didn't learn until later I should have been using pistols the entire time. And that putting conditions on enemies is very, very important, since you can't tank or really heal a dungeon. You said you were trying to heal a dungeon. How did that work?
On my 2-minute cooldown for my Ice Elemental, worked great. Whenever I couldn't get my Ice Elemental out, we all died.
Sounds about right. We didn't have any healer. I think our group was all melee and I think 1 ranged. That's another reason we died a lot. Unfortunately, Maze didn't get to run one. He didn't have time.
No, work schedule wouldn't really allow me to be able to get to that point.
Yeah, well, for Part 2, when we get to Guild Wars Part 2, when we do more of the endgame stuff, you'll have some experience in that. But, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about dungeons. Like I said, the first one kind of scarred me, because I'm used to, World of Warcraft, Star Wars, where, as long as you have a tank, healer, and DPS, and they're not stupid, you can do them pretty easily. They're not super demoralizing. Guild Wars 2, like I said, there was one boss where it took us 10 minutes, and every 2 minutes I died, or not even that, minute I died. That was really demoralizing. Liz, I heard you didn't even finish the dungeon.
No, we made it, I think, halfway to the first boss, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to think of videos I've watched for the dungeon. We didn't make it to the first boss before we completely fell apart, and I had to leave, so I couldn't just find a new group.
Yeah, see, our group didn't fall apart. We just died and just kind of sucked it up. Except for there's one boss later called the Lovers. That one I almost just threw my keyboard and left because we were making no progress for the longest time.
Flip table.
Yeah, pretty much. However, in the second dungeon, at least I found that it was easier. I don't know if that's just because my group had a lot more coordination in it, and that was why it was easier. My first group didn't have any. Everybody was just kind of out for themselves, whereas in the second dungeon I ran, I know I was throwing out more of the group buffs area and what are they called, skill fields? The little AoE things you put on the ground, and when people do stuff in them, it allows people to do special attacks.
I don't think I've actually ever had one of those.
Really?
Yeah.
I do them all the time, because at least for Thief, there's one where you throw like this smoke screen up, and then when you shoot through it, or when people shoot through it, it blinds. And I have an AoE that allows people when they're in it to, when they attack, steal life.
I probably just didn't group with anybody who had an ability like that, or they
They're
just
not
were stupid and didn't do anything. I have healing stuff. That's it. All my AoE stuff is damage. I don't give anybody boosts other than health.
Okay, because I know at least for fire elementals I've seen, I mean, they can put up burning stuff all the time. That's constantly up.
Yeah, and I'm not too sure if Engineer has anything, because most of what I put down is pretty much turrets, and nothing really to boost party members.
Yeah, but I found, at least for dungeons, you do need a coordinated group. Nobody can really go out for themselves, because otherwise they're just going to die.
Yeah, no lone wolf stuff.
Yeah, which is both, once again, good and bad, because it forces you to actually, think and not get zerg.
If you can, avoid pugs. That's pretty much the moral of the story.
Avoid pugs, get vent.
Vent, type, something to communicate.
Yeah, I'm not, like I said, when we do part 2, when we do some of the higher level dungeons, I'm interested to see how those go and pick up groups, and I'm in a guild now, so, in guild groups. So, I think that's all we have time for. I think that's all we wanted to talk about. So, that's Guild Wars 2. Now we're going to give off our scores for at least our impressions of the multiplayer, which is going to be the same for the written reviews, unlike later where they might be a little different, because it's an MMO. You're forced to play with people all the time. It's all group content, in my opinion. So for me, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I thought it was really good. It does have its issues, but nothing that, hurts it too bad. I think it's better than WoW, but that's because I think everything's better than WoW. Maze?
I give it an 8 out of 10. Game's pretty much solid on what it has. It does have its low points, but it's not something that will turn me away.
Alright. Liz?
I'm going to give it a 7, maybe a 7.5. The game's good, but I think the randomness of events can kind of kill the leveling experience.
Alright, so there you have it. An 8 from Maze and myself, and a 7 or 7.5 depending on her mood from Lizzie. Thanks for joining us. Next week we will be talking about Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Unfortunately it requires an online pass, and I'm not buying it. So we won't have a multiplayer session, but I will have some footage of arcade mode, and we'll still have 2 people to talk with. So thanks for listening, and tune in next week.
Later.
Goodbye.